Good afternoon, everybody. Esteemed guests from the European Commission, European Parliament, dear panelists, moderators, sponsors, and of course, dear delegates. On behalf of the Business Aviation Coalition on Sustainable Aviation Fuels, it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to the first ever European Business Aviation Summit on Sustainable Aviation Fuels, also known as SAF or SAF. I'm delighted to mention that we have over 1,000 delegates registered for today's event from 63 different countries. As I open today's summit, I would like to start by thanking everyone involved in making today happen. Thank you to Mrs. Adina Ioana Vălean, European Commissioner for Transport, for delivering an opening keynote address at our summit today. Your involvement, Mrs. Vălean, is greatly appreciated. Also, thank you to Mr. Jan Christophe Oetjen, Member of the European Parliament, Vice Chair of the Committee on Transport and Tourism, for delivering a closing keynote address. We look forward to your insights today towards the end of today's summit. And furthermore, I would like to thank our main sponsors, Bombardier, Dassault Aviation, Embraer, Gulfstream, Lux Aviation, and our supporting sponsor, Sky Energy, all of whom we would not have been able to bring you today's summit. And that leaves me finally with those others without whom today would not be possible, our expert panelists and moderators. Now, I have to say, it's a great honor for me to be speaking to all of you on behalf of the SAF Coalition. And for those who might not be aware, let me tell you a bit about who we are. The coalition is made up of the world's leading business aviation industry associations, representing manufacturers, operators, FBOs, fuel suppliers, and others. And the associations are the Commercial Aviation Alternative Fuels Initiative, the Canadian Business Aviation Association, the European Business Aviation Association, the General Aviation Manufacturers Association, the Helicopter Association International, the International Business Aviation Council, the National Air Transportation Association, and the National Business Aviation Association. The coalition is committed to educating the community about the use of SAF and promoting its use around the world. Now, to enable this, the coalition produced an SAF guide that was updated and published last summer. We hope that this brochure informs you and answers your questions about sustainable aviation fuel. You can find more information on the SAF Coalition tab here on the Summit platform. Now, allow me to talk to you a little bit about business aviation itself. Our industry is known by many names: unscheduled aviation, private jets, corporate flying, and general aviation, to name a few. But what exactly is business aviation, and what is its role in Europe? Business aviation is a non-scheduled travel solution, enabling people to meet face-to-face when time matters most. We're an industry that connects many small European communities and local airports, improving connectivity across Europe. Also, business aviation provides life-saving air transportation in times of public need, including medical evacuation services, and more as of late, transporting essential cargo and personnel and vaccines across Europe during the COVID pandemic. Not only that, business aviation truly is a catalyst for innovation. Due to our adaptability, our proven track record, and entrepreneurial spirit, we see that many of the forward-looking technologies find their beginning in our sector. As you can see on the screen, in normal times, the business aviation industry contributes 87 billion euros to the European economy annually and employs about 374,000 people directly and indirectly, creates active connective links between 1,400 European airports. Now, to put this contribution into perspective, I wish to mention that throughout the pandemic, we've operated at an average of minus 25% in 2020. Now, as I mentioned earlier, today is the first ever Business Aviation Summit in Europe on SAF. I'm convinced that this summit comes at an important time here in the EU. Within the context of the industry's climate targets dating from 2009 and the more recent European Green Deal, we can speak today about one of the ways in which business aviation can actively play its part by using sustainable aviation fuels. I'm looking forward to today's engaging keynotes and debates, such as in panel 1, where we will hear about the Business Aviation Commitment on climate change and find out what business aviation is doing to reduce its impact on the environment and what role SAF plays in that strategy. In panel 2, we'll dive into the upcoming Refuel EU Aviation Initiative, which will be one of the key policy instruments of the Commission to deliver on the objectives of the European Green Deal. And then finally, in panel 3 this afternoon, we'll be looking at the future, as we all are curious to find out what the next steps are in producing and distributing a larger amount of SAF in Europe for business aviation's use. As we get into the panel discussions later, may I remind all delegates to please use the Q&A tool to pose any questions they would like to our panelists. Now, before we get to the panels, I have the great honor and privilege of introducing Mrs. Alina Ioana Valean, Commissioner at Europe for Transport, to deliver our opening keynote address. Mrs. Valean, thanks very much again for being with us. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me to share my thoughts with you today. And just 2 days before world leaders mark Earth Day by gathering for a climate summit, I'd like to also thank you for your clear commitment to tackling climate change and for your support for our work on sustainable alternative fuels, which is key, one of the key ways in which the aviation sector can contribute to climate targets. Decarbonization is a pressing priority for all transport modes, but I cannot talk about that without acknowledging the extremely difficult situation in which aviation finds itself today. Flights across Europe are still at only 35% of 2019 levels. The situation is still so serious that it puts Europe's long-term connectivity at risk. We will go through this. I'm confident, and we'll get through this together. Despite the coronavirus setback, aviation is expected to grow more than all other transport sectors between now and 2050, because we have the technology to change and we have a plan and the prowess to change. We have committed to ambitious emissions reduction targets. To decarbonize aviation, we must approach the challenge from every angle: technology, operations, the market, and fuels. For the European Union to hit its goals of cutting emissions by at least 55% by 2030 and attaining carbon neutrality by 2050, sustainable fuels must account for an increasing share of aviation's fuel mix over time to reach more than 60% by 2050. Unfortunately, production is still at a very early stage. SAF use remains close to 0.5% of total jet fuel use. I'm, however, confident that our upcoming Refuel EU Aviation Initiative will take us to the next level. I hope it will significantly boost both the production and uptake of sustainable aviation fuels by establishing a long-term regulatory framework at European level avoiding reliance on national initiatives. Blending seems the best way to increase SAF production and use over time. We are currently looking at possible designs with the aim of adopting a legislative proposal before summer. The fuel industry needs time to ramp up capacity and production. Targets will be binding on the one hand, but on the other hand, they must be realistic, initially modest, but becoming more ambitious beyond 2030, and should include a prominent role for synthetic fuels in aviation. Manufacturers are already working on engines that can function on increased proportion of these fuels, and their production poses no threat to land use or water reserves. With the right economic and regulatory environment, our analysis suggests that synthetic fuels will become one of the main routes to decarbonizing aviation. Of course, the regulatory framework for SAF will also need flanking measures to promote the development of the market, including targeted financial support, certification for fuels, while preserving fair competition. We will therefore work with public authorities, the industry, producers, suppliers, airlines, and civil society to establish, we call it a renewable and low carbon fuels value chain alliance to boost the supply and development and also deployment of the most promising fuels. Airlines may end up paying a little more for fuel, but the increase should be modest. The cost for clean fuels must be shared as fairly as possible, just as the transition to sustainable fuels must be driven and endorsed by the entire aviation community. As aviation is global by nature, discussions in global fora like ICAO must also accelerate, and we must continue to convince our third country aviation partners that sustainable alternative fuels are the right choice to ensure aviation has a sustainable future. The challenge is huge, but we know what we need to do, and we need to start now, as 2030 is just around the corner. Against this backdrop, I find today's event on SAF very timely, and I welcome the Business Aviation Commitment on climate change. Many of today's panelists have been involved in our Refuel EU consultations and will certainly play an important part in its implementation across Europe. I'm very pleased that your event is so interesting for so many people, and this is because this is an essential topic for the future. And we know while we are struggling to pass now through the crisis, that the efforts to build back better are very important and difficult. So we need to engage in a conversation as soon as possible and find the right path for decarbonization and a competitive and solid future of our aviation industry. So thank you very much for inviting me again. I wish you an instructive and motivating discussion, and I'm counting on your continued support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Valéan, European Commissioner for Transport, for those very encouraging and also supportive remarks, and also giving us a bit of insights into what the European Commission's plans are to indeed enhance the use, uptake, and marketability of sustainable aviation fuel. So thank you once again for sharing your views with us. Certainly looking forward to working together with your colleagues in the Commission and in your staff to push this file further forward. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I suggest that we move into session 1 and to panel 1. So I have the honor to introduce to you Mr. Nicolas Chabert, who is the chairman of GAMA, who will lead the first panel of today's summit. Nicolas, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioner Valéan. Thank you very much for your presence today. Secretary General St. Can, thank you very much for your opening comments. I'm very pleased to be with you all so that with the first panel, we can show you business aviation commitment on climate change and SAF from the different perspective. As you know, it's a combination of goals and aggressive program to reduce business aviation impact on climate change. It builds on carbon neutral growth for 2020 and continuous improvement in fuel efficiency to achieve a reduction in total CO2 emissions, with SAF being a key element, and in fact, a very practical today towards achieving this commitment. In 2018, the Business Aviation Coalition for Sustainable Aviation Fuel was formed to collectively advance the global uptake of SAF as a readily available technology in support of this commitment. So the coalition recently published its second edition. Attar, you just mentioned about it, and to fill the knowledge gap and further widen this uptake of SF across business aviation value chain. But it's important for us to use this panel to explain you why we are committed and who is committed to make those changes. So I have the pleasure today to have a panel that is very wide, representing the industry. First off, I'd like to start with Marlene Bastin. She's head of Aviation Sustainability for Eurocontrol. Good morning, good afternoon, Marlene. I have Thierry Lamont. He's the Falcon Business Jet Operational Support Program Coordinator at Dassault Aviation. I have Jürgen Weiser, head of BMW Flight Service BMW Group. He's the chairman of the board of governors at EBA. Thank you for serving on one of our association. Jo Martens, VP Regional FBO Operations Europe and General Manager at Zurich for Jet Aviation AG. So thank you very much for having you today. And Stephen Lemoine is the Energy Program Manager at Airbus. Thank you everyone for being with us today. I'd like to basically turn to the panelists just for a what is your 60 seconds elevator pitch about what your company is doing on SAF. Marlene, you want to start?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Nicolas, and good afternoon to the audience. It's really a pleasure for Eurocontrol to be here today to this first SAF Summit. And maybe you are wondering why Eurocontrol has been invited to a SAF Summit, because we are not a SAF user or a SAF producer. But in fact, in our role to support the European aviation and to support the decarbonization of the aviation sector, we firmly believe that SAF is one of the main enablers to achieve the Green Deal to be climate neutral by 2050. So now concretely, what do we do as Eurocontrol? We do a lot of promotion around sustainable aviation fuel to try to increase awareness and to boost the use of sustainable aviation fuel. So for instance, last February, we have published our first edition of the Aviation Sustainability Briefing, in which we have 2 articles about sustainable aviation fuel. And we also produce a first sustainable aviation fuel map, listing all the all the SAF initiative across Europe. So it's just to give you an example of the things that we do. We have also the different think paper that we are publishing, and normally today we will have a new think paper about the so-called perfect flight trajectory. And of course, SAF is a key player to have more greener flight, of course. And we are also working on ETS and CORSIA. We are helping our member states, but also the aircraft operator to report their emission. And of course, for this, SAF has also a role to play, because it can contribute to reduce the amount of CO2 emission that can be compensated. So if you are curious to know more about what Eurocontrol is doing, I invite you to go to our website, but of course, after the summit.
Thank you, Marlene. We're so glad to have Eurocontrol on board. I think it's critical. It's a one very important component. Thank you for being with us today. Thierry Lamont, a few words.
Yes, Well, industrial aviation as an aircraft manufacturer, we are taking sustainability with great interest, and we are taking that very seriously into consideration. It's part of our continuous improvement process, and we want to transform the goal of reducing the Falcon impact to environment into technological solution. It's really our DNA in this show, and how do we translate that with multiple factors? In fact, we're optimizing the aircraft design itself to make it more efficient. We're working with the engine manufacturer also, because we shall fit a global solution and propose a global solution. And of course, we are also now integrating software solution. And to link with what Marilyn is saying, we want to optimize the trajectory of our aircraft to perform what I would call a kind of perfect flight. So all that is bringing a reduction into the fuel use. So it's better fuel efficiency, and better fuel efficiency means less CO2. But of course, what is the key factor for today's discussion is the use of SAF, and I'm glad to say that our business jet today, they are able already to fly with 50% SAF. And dear Commissioner Valerian, I can confirm that we are also working and going above that, and targeting probably 100% flight with SAF in a short future. So this is the topic of today's discussion, and we really need to have a supply to fly with a more environmental responsibility. Thank you.
Thierry, thank you for this introduction. As we can see with you, the manufacturers are very committed, and SAF is one important thing, but we also do a lot in terms of technology. It's not something that we have done just for now. We've been continuously improving the technology and working on the efficiency of our aircraft and the system of the aircraft. I'd like to turn the floor to Jürgen Wieser. A few words from your side.
Thank you, Nicolas. As a person who represents the operator view today and has the privilege to speak in this panel, I hope I can reflect on many of the activities and work other operators also do. But I can, of course, speak about what our company has done in the past 10 years, especially on the topic of sustainable aviation fuel. So we started working on the feasibility of SAF and its availability about 10 years ago. And in 2016, when we ordered a new small fleet of aircraft, in this process, we asked all the aircraft manufacturers who we invited to this call for tender to commit to the use of SAF, and also to commit to active support in accessing and getting SAF delivered to our home base. And we actually put that in our contract, in the final contract. And I think that's one of the things how we can see and seal the coalition also between manufacturers and operators. And so over the past 5 years, especially, we had intensive conversations with fuel providers and suppliers, and especially in 2016, how we can access SAF at our home base, and how we can investigate also in a, and we hear that later on today, in a book and claim system, because business aviation has a widespread network of destinations. You don't have a home base like an airline only, or big hubs, and that's how we also got involved in more conversations about book and claim. And so we are now on the final stretch of really getting a continuous flow of SAF to our home base in the near future. And also what we have done, we have set a clear target within our company of our goals of a SAF portion of our overall fuel uptake in the coming decade, to really increase our use of SAF with hopefully a decreasing price premium in the future.
Jürgen, thank you very much for that. I applaud what your company has done. It's important to see that the operators are committed. It's important to see an operator like BMW to be that committed, not only to climate change, but also, in fact, to the social change, as you laid out. Thank you for being with us today. I'd like to turn now 60 seconds to Jan Martins.
Thank you for the invitation to be here. We at Jet Aviation are truly committed to offer SAF to our customers around the globe. We have 8 lines of business and 50+ locations, so We know that the physical supply, the SAF itself is key, and we're working very hard on that. In a very near future, we expect to be able to have SAF at 2 of our locations in the Netherlands. We also know you also know that last year in Zurich, we did a one-time event which was historical for Switzerland because it was the first time that SAF was actually commercialized in Switzerland. So we've done that as well. We know that we want it for a permanent basis, but there's still work going on in the background. Also, since 2019, we are offering SAF already on a permanent basis at one of our stations in the US. And of course, as I mentioned, we have 50 different locations, and I go back to what Jürgen mentioned. The book and claim is key for the global reach of SAF. We know that physical supply is very important, and we're working on that where we are. But for the business aviation, general aviation, the other mechanisms that will reach out towards all the small stations is very important. We're also promoting the debate and the awareness towards customers, towards promote discussions between the public and the private entities, to increase also the supply and to explain the customers about the demand, about the opportunities, about what's in there. We know that that SAF is already starting to be the present, is going to be the future. We are very committed to get it to all our customers at all our stations and more. So really, Jet Aviation is working on this very hard, and we are here to support the industry on this one.
Thank you very much for your introduction. And again, it's important to have the FBO behind us and promoting, and probably again, Jet Aviation should be taking the lead. You have to say hi to my predecessor, Dave Paddock, that leads Gamma just before me. Now turning the floor to Stephen Lemoine from Airbus.
Thanks a lot, Nicolas, and good afternoon to everyone. Yes, of course, Airbus is really recognizing the great potential of SAF into decarbonization for aviation sector, the global sector. And that's why we're really engaged on supporting, the SAF usage ramp up. And to do this, basically, we are engaged in different streams with Airbus. So we have a lot of, I would say, advocacy activities, because it's really important to also make sure that the importance of SAF is well known and shared, particularly toward the policymakers, whether at state level or European level, because as we called in the introduction of this symposium, it's really important to have the adequate policies and also the incentivization mechanisms that are put in place to support SAF market emergence. But on top of that, we also have very concrete action on SAF. We first, on the technical aspects, we're very deeply involved in the SAF approval process by ASTM. And we are working also very deeply on going beyond the 2-day 50% blend limitation. I'm pretty sure you have seen our recent flights on the A350 with 100% SAF. Also, in parallel, we are really supporting our customers in this journey of decarbonization and on the way to use SAF. There is a great action to do for SAF education to our customers, to show them that it's a 100%, I can say, a safe solution that can be used on a very transparent manner on their 2-day operation. So that's really also one of our key activities. But we are not only talking about SAF, we are also practicing, I would say. So since 2016, we're offering the ability to get SAF for our customers for the deliveries, for the ferry flights. And very recently, fall of 2019, we also started to use SAF for our own internal operations. So starting with the Beluga out of Hamburg, and quite recently also still for the Beluga operating out of Broughton in the UK, we're getting SAF on board. So that's very a wide range, I would say, of commitment Airbus is doing around SAF.
Well, thank you very much, Stephen. It's very important to have Airbus on board, and I'm glad that you are a user already of SF. From this side of the panel, just a few words. I'm the Senior Vice President for the Aircraft Division at Daher and CEO of Daher Aircraft and Kodiak Aircraft. So I can tell you that also from the very small turboprop manufacturers we're committed to use SAF as well. But with that, I'd like to ask to the panel, I thank again for being with us today. Thierry, first I would like to start with you. What is the Business Aviation Commitment on climate change? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
First, Nicolas, of course, for us, climate change is not really a surprise. I would say that it's more than 10 years that we have been working all together to establish a BACCC, so the Business Aviation Commitment on Climate Change, with a set of actions that we want to share all together in order to decrease our footprint to the environment when we are using business aviation. And this includes different kind of measures, like the first one being the continuous improvement in fuel efficiency. We have a target of 2% improvement in terms of fuel efficiency. Of course, it goes step by step as soon as we can embed some improvement into our aircraft. The second point is the carbon neutral growth, as we settle as a target for 2020. So since now, the objective is that we do not increase anymore the impact to the environment when we are releasing CO2 into the atmosphere. And we want that to be either offsetted or decreased as much as it is possible. And this is why we are involved, for example, in the CORSIA mechanism at the ICAO, at the international level. But also I want to focus that I'm very happy to know that most of our customers, or many of our customers or operators today, they are already having offset in place. When they cannot decrease by the operation themselves, they can offset their CO2 emission, and they do that voluntarily. So it's a great practice. And of course, we have the big goal of 2050, where when we settle the BACCC, we put the objective of decreasing by 50% the amount of CO2 that we're going to release into the atmosphere in 2050 as compared to 2005. And this was settled 6 years before the Paris Agreement. So I shall say that our collective vision at that time was much more than accurate. And also all that goes along, as said by Stephen, with an education program where we have to inform and to share the knowledge about the environmental impacts of the aviation with our customers and the benefit of the new practices, optimization of the flight and use of the SAF, of course.
Thierry, thank you. So basically, this is not new for us. We are already committed and we're already producing results. So I think it's important to know that general aviation is already committed and continue to increase its commitment. So I'd like to ask Stephen, why is the Business Aviation Commitment on Climate Change so important for our industry?
Yes, thanks for the question. You spotted right, because on top of having, let's say, for example, Airbus is really also engaged in the fact to provide to the future generation a transportation means that is really sustainable. So that's a company commitment. But on top of that, really we need at the aviation sector level a global commitment. And the goal that Thierry explained just a few minutes ago need to be brought to the public society, brought to the policymakers on a common way, on an aggregated way, with a common commitment. So it's really important that all the stakeholders of the sectors are aligned on the common ambitions. So that's really a great advantage to really share this message and push this message. It's a right vehicle, I would say, also to be able that not only there is an ambition, but there is also a roadmap that is important to be able to identify key milestones to show that we can pave the way of decarbonization with concrete steps. And these messages need to be brought to, let's say, the not only the public society, but also at regional, global level, because we are a global industry, and two people that are able to set up the correct policies that will support this message and this ambition. That is really key. And on top also, for example, it really support the work from the aviation, because if we take the example of working on the 100% SAF usage, we cannot make it alone as one company. We need the engine manufacturers, for example, to work on it. So it's really important that the entire aviation sector understand where we want to go, where we need to go, and share and support this message toward the right people. So that's why it's really key to be able to set up such kind of let's say, commitment, clear, with once again clear milestone in terms of timeline.
So I think that business aviation wants to continue to serve, and this is why it's so important. So how do we engage with the operators? I'd like to ask Jürgen, how do business aviation operators contribute to the business aviation commitment on climate change? And in fact, can you give us some actual operations, some examples?
Yes, Nicolas. In the Business Aviation Commitment on Climate Change, we have the 4 pillars. The first pillar is, let's say, the infrastructure. That is something which is provided, for example, by Eurocontrol, and I have to bring it up. The Single European Sky is certainly still on our agenda, although we have heard about it for years, and it's a very important component. The other point is that's what business aviation operators can do, fuel efficiency on operations. Reducing the amount of fuel being used is an inherent desire of an operator, because it saves you money, but it also serves a better purpose. And then further on, we have demonstrated that there are ways to reduce fuel consumptions through the operations. You can reduce the amount of ground time for your APUs. You can use ground power units. You can have a single engine taxi on long stretches of taxiing at large airports, for example. All these things, better routes, more efficient routes, more efficient flight levels. All this can be done by an operator with the current technology. Now, moving on to other topics, the market-based measures, the third pillar also in these 4 pillars of the Business Aviation Commitment on Climate Change, is something I personally would say is a bridge. Of course, because the real measure, the real deal is the technology in alternative fuels. And here we really can, on the life cycle approach of this fuel, we can do the real savings in CO2 emissions. And that's where business aviation operators have already shown that in certain demonstrations, as were done through the coalition with the support of business aviation operators in Venice in 2019, in Farnborough in 2019, but also in Zurich, as Jean mentioned earlier, at the site of the World Economic Forum in January 2020, that we have shown that the use of SAF is feasible, and it can be used in our current aircraft. And this is, I think, the most promising contribution to reducing CO2 emissions. And one of the important things is that many operators are ready to take upon the environmental responsibility. Many operators in business aviation and their clients are ready to actually pay a premium price. And I think this is important also in comparison to many airlines. I know there are certain sectors of business aviation that are maybe even very, very price sensitive too. But other sectors of business aviation are ready to take on the environmental responsibility and are ready to take on the current high premium in price for the SAF. But we know we have to start it now, and everybody knows that one day you have to start it, and the price will certainly go down with increased uptake. And that's what is important to know about business aviation: its readiness to take environmental responsibility.
I take that mindset change is something that is already at your company, but you see that from other operators. So if we just wanted to look a little bit further, Yao, can you tell us what is your company doing to support the objectives set by the Business Aviation Commitment on climate change?
Well, as I mentioned, we're working hard to have SAF available where possible. That's clear. Of course, also the book and plan to have it available actually globally then. We have some growing interest from customers as well. You know, there's customers from all of our lines of businesses asking for SAF, either being the MRO, the completions, aircraft management, charter, FBO customers. The customers are starting to be interested, are starting to demand, to ask for availability. Of course, there's a lot behind. We need to make sure, as I said in the beginning, debating with the public and the private entities about the supply. We need more production. We need better logistics because the premium is there, as Jürgen mentioned, and it's a high premium. We have to, and there's a big portion of customers that yes, they want to do something, but it's still a very high premium, and that has a big impact. So only all of us working as one group and pushing it to the right direction with more production, better logistics, and keep putting the awareness on the customer, we will be able to reduce this and globalize and generalize the usage of SAF. We are very much into it. We're pushing as much as we can. Our customers as well. As I said, there's interest. So there's everything to move. As I said, this is going to be the new normal SAF. But we still get there. Basically, we need to get traction to start the ball running.
Thank you. I get that we are ready. I mean, it seems that everything's in place to kick the ball rolling. So there's a lot of pressure on you, Marleen, with your control. Can you tell us why SAF is considered as a prime way to decarbonize aviation?
Yes, of course, I will try. But Jürgen has already said a lot of things, to be honest. So he mentioned the 4 pillars, and that's true. If we want to decarbonize, we have 4 main pillars. And when it comes to aircraft and engine technology, business aviation is already quite good. You have already a very efficient fleet with a lot of equipment on board. So I think for this dimension, at least, you are already very good. And we don't expect any disruptive change before 2030 or 2040, of course. And then we have this ATM optimization. And last December, Eurocontrol has published a report regarding the fuel inefficiency pool in the network area, in which we have 8 to 11% of fuel inefficiency. But again, business aviation is doing a lot. And because you have a quite efficient fleet and you are able to fly very optimized profile. So on this, you are already doing a great job and you are working a lot on this. So if we want to go beyond this 10%, you need to do more. And what could be done? It's sustainable aviation fuel, in fact, because it's already there. And what do we think is that for short and medium haul, at least, it will ensure the transition while waiting for new aircraft technology to be available, like hydrogen, hybrid, electric, and so on. For the long haul, we do believe that SAF will play a role for many years to go, for sure. Now, regarding SAF, if we look to the benefits of SAF, it can be used already now. It's something that has been said also by Jürgen. You don't need to change your engine, you don't need to change your aircraft, meaning that it can be implemented right now, which is, of course, very important. And also, the SAF producers are ready. They are just waiting for more demand, of course, to produce more. So it's here that we have something to play, of course. When it comes to the reduction of CO2 emission, with SAF, we could reduce up to 80% compared to traditional jet fuel. So it's, again, another benefit. And it's also something that I have mentioned at the beginning, but when it comes to reporting your emission for EU ETS and for CORSIA, if you are using SAF, you will be allowed to reduce the number of CO2 of emission that you will need to compensate it. So with all these benefits, I must say that it's why it's considered the most promising measure to decarbonize, because it can be done now.
Thank you, Marleen. There's a lot that is said, but allow me, Thierry, to dig a little bit more into why SAF is a key in delivering the Business Aviation Commitment on climate change. Just give us a little bit why it is so important beyond what Marleen has said.
Yeah, thank you, Nicolas. In fact, we shall remember that sustainability will not be reached with one single global magic technology or solution, but it's really a combination of multiple sources that we shall consider. And as I said before, we are working on different way of improving our environmental footprint, like providing the new design and new lighter and improved airframes, and this this is giving us some percentage of improvement. It's step by step, and it's not a big step forward each time. It's a lot of effort for obtaining a small percentage. If we go for the new engine technology, is the same. We go step by step, and we can expect to reach 5–10% of improvement when we go to the new engine, maybe 15% maximum. This is the maximum that we can do. With the optimized trajectory, as said by Marilyn, we can expect to have 8–11%, so let's say 10% of improvement. So with those combination, we can get a lot. But the great benefit of SAF is really to bring us, as of now, immediately, a possible 80% of improvement in terms of CO2 reduction when we look at the life cycle analysis of the production and use of this kind of fuel. So this apply on the blend, and I remember you that today we can use up to 50% of SAF. So this means that 80% of benefit on 50% of the fuel. This means that as of today, immediately, if we have a supply, we can reach 40% of reduction of the CO2 footprint of our business jet. And tomorrow, when we will go to 100% SAF on board, probably we can reach close to 80% of improvement. So it's a huge benefit that we can expect from SAF, and especially when I look at the power to liquid of the synthetic fuel that are coming now, I consider this is having a great potential. But of course, this can be done if we can increase the uptake, if we can increase the production, and also if we can offer it. And I want to insist, as my colleague, on the fact that we shall offer it at any place where the business aviation aircraft are being used. And it's a lot of aircraft of airports, as I said, 3 times more than the airlines. So it's very difficult to bring the SAF here. So this is why the book and claim solution shall be considered, and I think this will be addressed in a later panel. Now, of course, this can be done if we can obtain a reasonable price for those fuel. If it's too expensive, there will be some reluctancy to use it, or we'll use a low blend, so we'll have less benefit, less immediate benefit. But I'm really convinced that business aviation can lead and show the way forward to all the aviation sector, and working on that and continuing the development and the use of SAF in the very short future. Thank you.
Seems that, Thierry, that this is the perfect solution for our emission. But there is one question that I had to ask Stephen. Is SAF safe to use? And let's take the helicopters. I can take you another example. Across the Atlantic on a single engine turboprop. Is it safe to use SAF?
Thanks, Nicolas, for the question too. The short answer would be yes, of course. But let me elaborate on this. And first message I would like also to pass on this is really that the aviation sector has made its duty on this question of how SAF can be used by the aviation sector. Indeed, today you already have 7 pathways that are approved, and that can be considered as JT1. So meaning, indeed, you can use them as normal jet fuel and kerosene. So it's fully transparent. As mentioned by our previous panelists, you can use them directly without any modification, whether on the helicopters or aircraft fuel system, or even engine or turbine. So it's really a great advantage to have a technically ready solutions to be used for decarbonization. So, and that's for me a great example of the commitment of aviation not being a blocker in this pathway to decarbonization. We have made what we have to do in terms of technology, ensuring that we can use the SAF safely up to 50% today, but also, as mentioned, we are working to go beyond this limitation. So it's really a key message. Okay, aviation is doing all that need to be done to SAF usage. Let's get also the required support to ramp up this usage, ramp up this production. And of course, we will be able to use this SAF on the helicopters, on the corporate jets, on the civil aviation jets. So it's really one of the key elements for decarbonization, even if we, of course, support all the different pillars for reaching this decarbonization. So yes, SAF is safe.
Okay, well, I'm convinced. Thank you for the explanation. So, if I may, can you tell us about how has interest in SAF evolved with your customers? Can you give us some example? I just, want to explain a little bit. I'm sure that there are some people sitting on the fence. So, what is your perception?
Yes, Nicholas. Indeed, as I mentioned a while, there's a growing interest on the customers. There's the questions about availability, about pricing, of course, if it's safe. There was those questions in last year here in Zurich. Of course, it's as Steven said, it's safe. Yes, usually at the main airports, at main hubs, it goes in anyway into the main fuel farm, so it's actually blended with all the other millions of liters with Jet A1 with a fossil. So but there's a question. There's a question from customers. There's an interest. Again, the pricing. It's something that touches a big portion of the business aviation industry, and the premium, as I mentioned in a while, is quite high. But anyway, I think it's important as well the create the awareness to the customers again about the safety, about the pricing. There's a reason behind. But also with the public and the private partners to bring more production so that it reduces the costs, then it starts being more commercially viable, and then the interest will grow. We already have interest around all lines of business, as I mentioned. We do even have some tenders coming out where specifically is requested if SAF is available at some of our stations. So it's coming. The interest is there already. There's a portion of the customers that are ready to pay that premium, as Jürgen very well mentioned, but there's still a big portion that are still very much looking into that. So we need to together make sure that we can optimize this commercial part so that everyone actually goes on board and just, as I said, the ball is rolling. That's what I should have said a while ago. The ball is already rolling, but it needs to get speed. It needs to move faster, And but yes, the interest is here. The questions are here. So we just have to push for it, basically.
Thank you for this. It's very reassuring that you have demand, you have interest. I'd like to ask Jürgen. You've been, definitely taking the lead at BMW. But what are the other challenges around SAF for operators? What do you see? Is there any more obstacles? I mean, we talk a little bit about price. I mean, is that something that is a concern to you?
Yes, Nicola, price certainly, but I think foremost amongst operators, fellow operators who I have been talking to over the past years, and still now, is that misconception about safety, and that's why it's very important. And as Stephen pointed out, and already pointed out, that we stress again, it's safe to use, and there is guidance available from the coalition, and we cannot stress it again and again, and because it's like if you have your high-performance car, people are still reluctant to use the E10 fuel in their high-performance car because they think their warranty gets voided by the manufacturer. So maybe it's also a pledge from operators to our partners in the industry to really make clear again through maybe even increased language or better language in warranties and so on to make take that fear away. But also that misconception is not only on the operator side, but what I saw now even at large airports is on the airport operator and tank farm operator side, who have some concerns about the safety and the technical aspects. So I think there's a lot to do again for the education, and we have to stress again the fuel is safe. The other point is certainly the price, but that can be mitigated, as was mentioned earlier, through starting small. You start small, but you start. You start with 1%, 2%, whatever your fuel uptake is, and then have a target in your company to increase it as price will hopefully decrease. But we cannot start without laying an egg, and somebody has to lay the egg, okay? It's the chicken and egg question.
Yes.
And the other point is, I think, which is very important, and I stress it here also, is how do we deal with the book and claim is a topic in the later panel, but there's a very important topic is which may also increase the uptake later on for the operators, if we find measures how to actually accept the uptake of SAF in an emission trading scheme. Because currently, if you don't use that fuel, it's probably hard to get credit for the fuel. And as an operator, you don't want to pay twice the high premium on the initial price, and maybe later on you have to pay for the CO2 emissions, which you have already reduced, but you may not get credits. And this is especially a topic as the carbon credits, or the price per ton of CO2 will become a fixed one in the near future, or in some countries it's already a fixed one. And so this is something which has to be addressed also.
Jürgen, I think we are going to take your advice, and we need to continue to pitch, the safety aspects, and hopefully, the economical is going to settle. I like to end this panel with Marlene, because I think it is important that Eurocontrol is on board, and I'm absolutely sure that you will not sacrifice any safety if you had any concerns. So maybe I'll ask you the question: why is business aviation support of SAF so important? So can you just tell us, where is that commitment going to lead us?
Of course, I think I have mentioned it before, but when it comes to ATM optimization, you have a quite efficient fleet and a lot of equipment on board. And so when it comes to the network, I see the business aviation sector like a pioneer. And I think that for sustainable aviation fuel, it's the same. You have a role to play in this challenge, to be a pioneer and to increase awareness about SAF. And I think that it's exactly what you are doing now with this summit. So it's really great, because I mentioned it before, if we want to decrease the cost related to SAF, if we want to increase the demand and so on, we need to increase awareness. And I think that, like for ATM optimization, the business aviation sector can play the role of a pioneer and to lead by example. And I think that it's something that has been also mentioned by Thierry.
Marlene, I really like your words. I think leading by example is something that we want in the industry, and I feel extremely privileged to have moderated this panel and to have these great comments. You said it's not just about fuel; it's about our future. I mean, we do think that general aviation is an important component of our society and economy. So I would really like to thank you, every one of you, very much for taking the time today and addressing my questions. I hope that the audience is not only convinced, but actually committed as much as you are for your individual company. And as I can say, from an industry perspective, all of the general aviation industry that I represent with Gamma is absolutely behind SAF, and very, in fact, interested in seeing that adoption to be largely made. When and we want to have the fuel provider to be also committed. So this is going to be addressed probably in one of those panels later. And with that, I like Secretary General Arthur. I like to turn the floor back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nicolas, for running that extremely informative panel. It's great to hear from the various players in the business aviation industry on the aviation's commitment on climate change, what they're doing to fulfill that commitment, but also indeed that there still are challenges and concerns out there that need to be addressed. So thank you very much for running that panel. I have a remark for the audience. We're seeing that a number of questions are coming in, which is absolutely great. And we would really encourage you to keep on posing your questions to the moderators and to the panels later this afternoon as well. Unfortunately, because we are running quite a tight time schedule, we're not in a position to answer all those in the panels, but we will commit to answering them in writing later on to you. So please don't hesitate and keep on coming with your questions. Having said that, I would like to inform everyone that we'll be taking a 5-minute break, 5-minute intermission. You can enjoy some video content and video footage. And in 5 minutes, we'll be back with the second session and the second panel. So see you all in 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Embraer is working to create a sustainable future in which business aviation thrives in good stewardship of the planet. How is Embraer accomplishing this mission? As a company with a deeply rooted heritage in environmentalism, Embraer was the first aviation manufacturer to certify their facilities to ISO 14001 standards in 2002, which is a critical industry benchmark for minimizing environmental impacts. Additionally, Embraer developed and built the first aircraft that flies on 100% biofuels, the Ipanema. It's the only certified aircraft on the planet that flies using only ethanol. Embraer's business fleet flies to industry events using biofuels as well, in an effort to promote the use of these sustainable fuels and to push toward their future widespread adoption. Embraer's devotion to sustainability continues with the Praeterra interior concept for the Praetor 600, which pushes the boundaries of design by combining digital lines with organic shapes. This interior vision incorporates renewable bamboo composite fabric, lighting effects from reclaimed ocean plastic, and airplane graveyard alloy, all show what can be done when you combine a passion for innovation with stewardship. For over 50 years, Embraer has taken pride in connecting people around this beautiful Earth. For the next 50 years, we're honing our vision on a sustainable future that works in harmony with the interconnectedness of all things on the planet.
Good afternoon, everyone, once again, and welcome back to the Business Aviation Summit on Sustainable Aviation Fuels. Happy to move us all into the second session and the second panel, which will be moderated by Mr. Alasdair White, who's the Corporate Jest Investor Founder. And Alasdair, the floor is yours, so over to you.
It's a real honour. Thanks to everyone in the coalition. It's very exciting to be part of an event with more than 1,000 people watching around the world. We've got a fantastic panel with 4 expert speakers, so I'm going to go straight over to them. We're going to be focusing on the European Commission's Refuel EU Aviation Initiative. Refuel is not an energy drink, even if it sounds like one, but I'm delighted to move around our group. First up, we're honoured to have Philippe Cornelius, Director of Aviation at DG Move at the European Commission. Philippe, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
It's great to have you. Could you just give us a 60-second overview of what you're doing in this area?
Well, so we have in our work program to propose this year a new EU regulation on sustainable aviation fuels. We are well advanced our upstream work. We've done several workshops with industry, and we've had great feedback, response, and input. And I think we now understand where we need to go with this proposal that should normally be adopted before this side of the summer holidays. And of course, then we'll need to go to Council and European Parliament before it can actually be adopted. We hope to present it in the form of a regulation, which means that it becomes immediately applicable once it's gone through Council and Parliament. So we could have something in place pretty soon, because I do expect quite a lot of support politically from both the Parliament and the Member States. Of course, there's going to be discussion on details, but broadly speaking, there's a lot of support. And this will no doubt take the form of a blending mandate. Among all the options that have been discussed, this is the one that we believe is going to be best able to address that chicken and egg problem and help the demand and supply curves to meet somewhere. The only way to do that at this point seems to be to have some form of mandate in place that we hope to shape in a way that it will both boost the supply and uptake of sustainable aviation fuels, but also maintain and secure a level playing field for operators working out of European airports, because that's always also been quite an important concern in this area, considering the fact that those fuels will probably remain more expensive than kerosene for quite some time to come. So I'll stop here, and we'll come back to other points, I guess, in the discussion. Thank you very much, Alasdair.
No, thanks, Philippe. That's a great introduction, and there's lots for us to come back into. What's really exciting about this panel is we've got a complete 360-degree view of Refuel. So I'd like now to welcome Frank Moistra, Senior Vice President, Strategy and Future Programs at Rolls-Royce Deutschland. Frank, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Alasdair.
So do you want to give us, I think many of the people on the call will know that Rolls-Royce has been very active in SAF. Do you want to give us your 60-second overview?
Absolutely, my pleasure. So as you said, yeah, we are very active. And obviously we're supporting Philippe in setting up the Refuel program. But being a strategy guy, obviously, I would really like to dwell a little bit on our strategy and our sustainability strategy in civil aerospace and in business aviation. So basically, we're building it on 3 pillars. The 3 pillars are more radical technologies like electrification and hydrogen, but the center of our strategy is really all about the gas turbine and also SAF. And when you look at our industry, so business aviation, certainly the products we are producing, they are for long range and medium range flying, and the gas turbine won't be displaced for a very long period of time. So for the foreseeable future, I think we need to rely on the gas turbine. So basically, for us, it's really important to, on one hand, improve the efficiency of the gas turbine. And when you look at the products which we have developed over the recent years, like our Pearl family for business aviation, we have significantly improved the efficiency from a predecessor. We're talking about efficiency improvements north of 5 and 6%. And on the other hand, we obviously very much committed as an industry and as an industry player to introduce SAF. So we have been testing quite a bit, and not only our Pearl engine, but also our large turbofans on 100% SAF. So as the panel before said, and lots of people have really repeated this, basically the products are ready and certified for 50% blend, which we can introduce basically today without any problems. But obviously we are working on in getting the industry to 100%, and obviously we will discuss it a little bit later. So again, the combination of an improved gas turbine and SAF is inevitable for the future of our business, from my perspective. And again, I think it is important that we as an industry, basically there's a foundation to be able to run at whatever blends we want to run, but 100% is obviously the ultimate goal. But we would need to have obviously people like Philip and the EU Commission in order to help us to get SAF on the market and get SAF promoted for business aviation. And as I think Atta said at the very beginning, we are a very innovative industry. So where you want to begin with introducing SAF, I think business aviation is the place to be.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for that, Frank. So we've heard from the regulator, the manufacturer. We're now delighted to have an operator. Nicholas Kroll is head of sustainability projects at Lux Aviation Group. Nicholas, do you want to give us your 60-second pitch?
Yes, of course. Let me start by saying that SAF to us is one of the major, if not the most important building block to our corporate sustainability strategy. So we really think that in the short and medium term, SAF will be one of the most important instruments to reduce our industry's carbon footprint. So we look very much forward to be able to offer this to our clients. Being one of the largest operators in the world, having direct contact with a lot of aircraft owners and charter clients, we believe we have a role to play, that we have a responsibility. So we look forward to work together with the industry to offer this and push this through to our clients. There are, of course, a few challenges that we still have to face to develop SAF and all the legal framework and the supporting materials, the book and claim principle. So we still have some steps, I believe, we need to take before we can really introduce this on a high scale into the market. But we are very excited that we are developing this, and we look forward to be a key player in this.
Awesome, thank you. And to make sure this really is a 360-degree view, rather than just having people from within inside the business aviation industry, we're delighted and honoured to have Andrew Murphy, Aviation Director at non-government organisation or NGO Transport and the Environment. Andrew, over to you.
Hi. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for organising this very interesting event. It's a very timely event. It's a very interesting period for the aviation sector as a whole, with a lot happening and a lot changing. To give an example of just from today, the UK government has announced that it's going to include all aviation emissions, international and domestic, in its climate target. And that's a big change from when governments here in Europe would exclude international aviation emissions from the target. So the sector can expect a lot more regulation, a lot more government support to reduce its emissions. And another big change we're seeing is just so fewer companies and so fewer countries relying on offsetting. So it really focuses the need for the business aviation sector to work with new fuels, to get new fuels developed, and to get new fuels into engines as soon as it's practical. So the question then is, what should the aviation sector, what should the business aviation sector be doing to support these fuels? Well, Commissioner Valley and a number of other speakers highlighted that what we need to do is focus on synthetic kerosene, e-fuels, e-kerosene as it's known, as that's the fuel that can be scaled up. And that's really where the business aviation sector should be focusing. I think it's a curious fact that earlier this year, the first flight powered by e-kerosene was conducted by KLM. a legacy carrier. And so to some extent, you have a situation where, I would have thought it would be the other way around, that the business aviation sector, which can be so cutting edge, which has clients who are no doubt interested in the latest technology, should be the ones who are experimenting with the most cutting edge fuels. And yet today, I still sometimes see private jet companies who are purchasing offsets. So, it should kind of be the other way around. The legacy carrier using the legacy climate tool of offsetting. The business aviation sector be the ones who are most supportive of more cutting edge fuel. And so, we should see the business aviation sector, if it can, when it can, be much more ambitious, much more cutting edge by the type of fuel it uses. And we would like to see the business aviation sector being very supportive of the type of regulations that Philippe and his colleagues are developing. Industry-owned initiatives are fantastic. They are always important first steps, but they're never by themselves enough. When Refuel EU comes out, it will have implications for the business aviation sector. But we'd hope the business aviation sector can row in fully behind the Commission to get the legislation passed as quickly as possible. Because the sooner the regulation is there, the sooner we can really unlock the investment needed to bring these fuels up. So those are some of my opening thoughts, and looking forward to this discussion.
That was great, Andrew, and there's some nice challenges which we'll come back to in a second. Philippe, you've given us a brief intro of Refuel. Is there anything else you think people should understand about it?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of parameters that we've had to look at in designing this possible future mandate. First of all, the question of the ambition level will be an important both technical and political decision. We want to be ambitious and realistic at the same time. We don't want to be so ambitious that we create a shortage of fuels in the market, but we do want to push this market forward and stimulate investment to take up the feedstock that is already there in sufficient quantity for some time to come. Even though in the long term, it's clear we need to move into the more advanced biofuels as well as e-fuels to be able to get to the kind of scale that we will be looking for in future decades. So that calls for a gradual ramp up that will probably be expressed in terms of percentage blends. And we are also very actively considering a sub-mandate for synthetic fuels that should help to kickstart that sector into production, because they do have a very significant price handicap today, and there is a risk if we don't have a sub-mandate there that they would not be able to enter the market in any significant way. We also have to look at the scope of our measure. We want to have maximum impact, obviously. In order to do that, we should probably not limit ourselves to internal flights, but rather to all flights that depart from European airports. So that's the kind of design that we are looking at, because it is still the case that simply because the distance is longer, many of the external flights are accounting for much more of the fuel burn of our airlines than just the internal flights. We will need to also make choices on the types of fuels that are eligible for that blend. Here, our inclination is not to try to invent something for our own purposes in aviation, but rather to rely on general sustainability rules that are contained in the Renewable Energy Directive, that is also up for a review, by the way, but that it contains a sustainability framework that is accepted in Europe and that we should also definitely rely on. And we do need to make sure also we have the right processes in place to ensure enforcement. We're hoping to create a very simple instrument, possibly without a take-up obligation on airlines individually. If we manage to secure the supply of those blends everywhere, then we don't actually need to have a check airline by airline how much is uplifted. But we will need airlines and operators in general, of course, business aviation as well, to be able to receive the data of how much they are uplifting and what type of fuels they are uplifting, so that you can then use that to obtain credit under the ETS system and under CORSIA. So we will need to have some paperwork in the system. Most of that already exists under ETS and under the renewable energy framework. So we're hoping to put in place quite a simple system with not much administrative additional burden. And lastly, of course, we will also need to be able to review our approach in the future. There are many unknowns in this area. We don't know for sure how the industry will ramp up production, what the cost will be in the market a couple of years from now, what new pathways and technologies could emerge once we create such a mandate. So this would be a type of regulation that will need to be reviewed from time to time to be able to keep pace with developments and also keeping an eye on our overall objectives for 2030 and 2050 in terms of emission reduction. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. That was great. This is a very cruel question because you haven't even taken it to either of them yet. But what would you guess the blending will stay at towards the end? The blending mandate, what percentage do you think that will be?
Well, we are looking also all the way up to 2050. Despite hopefully new technologies such as hydrogen-based aircraft, we expect that we will still need rather large quantities of SAF in order to reach our carbon neutrality. So particularly for long-haul aviation, and definitely the work that is being done on going beyond the 50% limit of blending in the long run will be clearly important if we want to achieve those targets of carbon neutrality. We will definitely need more than 50% blends looking at 2050.
Okay, thank you.
At that point as well, we expect most of those fuels will have to be synthetic fuels.
Which is something we're going to come back to in a second. Andrew, what are your thoughts on this when you're hearing that there might not be a take-up obligation? I'm guessing you're pleased it's not going to probably just involve internal flights, but what are your thoughts? And I know you've been involved in the process throughout as a stakeholder.
I think there's a lot good in what Philippe has outlined in the proposal. I think it's heading in the right direction. I think what we need to do is create a market for these fuels. I know it sounds like a very simple statement, but let's break it down to what that involves. It means we need to make sure there's the supply there and there is a demand there. A note on the supply, e-kerosene is a new type of fuel. I think it's an exciting type of fuel, one which has potential, but it needs a lot of support, and that support has to come from governments, because governments can do that. I know last week the European Commission launched a research program between the EU and Japan on breakthrough new fuels for aviation. And I think that's really welcome to see us cooperating with third countries in being at the forefront of developing new fuels. And then along with supply, we need demand. And demand doesn't, in a sense, come from two sort of points. It's the fuel providers or it's the aviation airlines themselves. I think what's important is to have a good blending obligation on the sector, and one that's realistically ambitious. And there is some concern I hear sometimes from some people in the industry that, well, we'll set a high target and we won't be able to achieve that. It'll be too high. I can see why that's a concern. But if you structure this mandate well, what would happen is supply will fall a little bit short. Fuel suppliers will have to pay, a penalty for not being able to supply this fuel. The penalty can go into a fund to support the fuel. It's a bit like what happens in the car sector, where car manufacturers sometimes fall a little bit short on their CO2 target. They have to pay a fine. I think it's better to have a target where maybe we fall a little bit short and a penalty is paid than setting targets which are too weak at the outset, in which fuel producers very easily meet because we've lacked ambition. And I think we can be ambitious in this area, because I think in the next decade we're going to see a lot of new technology and new fuels being deployed.
Sorry, although you don't want aircraft manufacturers turning off the engine and rolling past testing, which we saw happen in the auto industry. And Andrew, very quickly, when you say e-fuel, we've had a question from the audience. Are you referring to the same SAF as everyone else?
Sorry, yes, I should probably be more consistent myself. Yes. E-fuels refers to any fuel which is produced using renewable electricity, and from e-fuel you can produce e-diesel for cars and e-kerosene for aviation. So I should be more consistent and say e-kerosene for aviation, because we don't want e-diesel for cars, because cars are much better directly electrified. All those e-fuels should go into the tanks of aircraft.
Brilliant, and I think that's great. And Nicholas, what are your thoughts as an operator, as someone who can drive demand? What are your thoughts on refuel?
From our perspective, we applaud, we welcome the initiative. We think it's really necessary to have a public-private partnership to drive this development and basically supply of SAF. We think there's definitely some support required to develop a good legal system. Today, as an operator, we're still a bit puzzled. If we buy SAF, how can we use it to offset our mandatory requirements? But I hear that this is all being developed. I also welcome the remark that they want to keep it simple, because I think many operators within the business aviation industry are relatively small. So we really don't want administrative burden to become the leading thing of SAF. But no, we definitely think it's a good idea. When it comes to blending mandates, we were a bit cautious, of course. It shouldn't be too high from the beginning, because to give you an example, we've been looking at SAF and we realized that even at a 20% blend, we already talk about the 30% fuel price surcharge. So that's quite significant because the prices are still so high. So it would make sense to drive the mandates, the minimum percentage of blend up as the price comes down and the supply and demand is increasing.
And you don't think your customers are prepared to pay that surcharge now?
Some definitely do, but probably not all. And some of the companies also, they own the aircraft themselves. They only use it for charter. So then you might, if it's not mandatory for everyone, then you might find yourself in a tricky position.
Nicholas, we've got a question from Jack Whittles saying, what are the main types of SAF? Are synthetic fuels different?
I'm sorry, the main tax of SAF?
Main types of SAF.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, there's a few different ones. Cooking oils are used a lot, I believe, and a lot of garbage is transformed. But I must be honest, since the supply is so low and we haven't been actually able to get a hold of SAF yet, there's still basically for us the main challenge is that there's a lack of documentation and transparency. So we are struggling to actually offer it today to our customers because we're lacking a good framework, information, documentation, and legal setting. As an operator, we have the direct relationship with clients. We often have a long-standing one that is based on trust. And in order to push through the product, we really feel that we need more information and there needs to be more support and transparency about what the product actually is, where it comes from, exactly what is the benefit that is realized when you buy SAF. So that I think is a challenge in the short term to further develop that.
Okay, that's great. Frank, we're talking about blending mandates. As a manufacturer, do you want to just take us through what you think's achievable? You've famously flown an aircraft on 100% SAF.
Yeah, as I alluded to in my initial speech, we have done quite a bit of testing as of yet. So we have tested bench engines on a sea level test bed with 100% SAF, and one of this was the Pearl 700. And the other one was a large engine, which is a Trent 1000 based technology demonstrator. But as Stephen said in the panel before, we now have flown engines as well together with Airbus. So what we call eClif 3, this is a program which we do with Airbus, DLR and Neste. And this is basically measuring the performance and the emissions of an engine in flight. And we have done the initial flying through the flight clearances. and we have done the first test points as well. So I guess, and this is all on 100% SAF, so I think it works. And we have used HEFA SAF for all the tests, basically. One was supplied by Neste, obviously, and the other one was supplied by a company in California. Just a matter of caution. Obviously, I think I agree absolutely with Andrew. I guess we as an industry, we need to be more bullish and more pushy on e-fuels. And I honestly believe e-fuels is sort of the future. It just consumes a lot of energy, so we need to find a way of producing the energy required to produce e-fuels, and it needs to be carbon neutral as well. But when we talk about the specification of the fuel, and when we go north of 50%, like say up to 100%, what we actually really want to avoid is that we have a fuel spec which is not sort of a drop-in fuel, and we would need to do major modifications to the aircraft and to the engines in order to be able to fly with this sort of fuel. So I think on one hand, I guess mandates are really, really necessary and really, really helpful. On the other hand, I think we just need to work together with the fuel producers that we agree is spec, which is suitable to really fly in our products.
Andrew, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I mean that issue of distinguishing between 50 and over 50%. I mean, you know, I wish we were at a situation where we were talking about close to 50% supply of e-kerosene and SAF in the aviation fuel market. Alas, we're not quite there yet. You know, what we've seen circulated is figures as low as 0.7% for e-kerosene in 2030. So I think that there's still a long way to go with that particular concern. So yeah, I mean, I think, you know, our concern is bringing above 0.7, and indeed to make sure we choose the right SAFs. And I know one difficulty for the business aviation sector and for those who are concerned about trying to reduce their climate impact is to know which are the right fuels to support, because of course it can be very confusing with the different feedstocks and HEFA and UCO. You know, as somebody who's been working in it a while, I find it a little bit confusing. I mean, I think what's important is to get the type of fuel right from the get-go, and to recognize that any fuel which comes from land is going to be competing with forestry and food. You know, we're not making any more land. But pre-COVID, aviation demand was going in one particular direction. And other types of fuel, the more advanced fuels from certain feedstocks, like, you know, municipal solid waste and forestry residue, I mean, obviously they're better. But there's only so much municipal solid waste and forestry residue out there. And okay, gathering that up and putting it in aircraft, it has some climate benefits. But in terms of really changing the landscape, changing the industry out there, you know, there is a potentially limitless amount of renewable electricity. In a way, there isn't a limited amount of municipal solid waste, there isn't a limited amount of land. And if the business aviation sector is kind of wondering what's the biggest impact we can have, it is about delivering demand and investment into the fuel which can be scaled up.
Although I do think there are cities in the UK where there's an almost unlimited amount of fat, oil from fish and chip shops.
I'm not sure if that's an attack on certain cities in the UK, but I mean, we have T&E will have a study out, I think tomorrow actually, on the availability of UCO, and you know there's a lot of UCO, but it takes a lot more UCO to fly aircraft around Europe and around the world.
It wasn't an attack; it was a celebration. And actually, okay. Bottles, when you've got your mayonnaise and your frites, you know, there's a lot there. I'm joking. Philly, you're listening to all this, and you want to keep it as simple as possible, but we've already made it very complex, haven't we?
Well, not necessarily. My hope would be that as an operator, you wouldn't need to bother too much about sourcing any particular type of biofuel or a sustainable or e-fuel. You know, you could just uplift what is being offered at your airport. You would need to get a certificate of what it actually is to be able to claim it afterwards against ETS and CORSIA, but it shouldn't probably be too complicated on the customer end. It's really up to the fuel sector to bring those fuels to the market, and And here, what we have seen is that definitely there is considerable feedstock, although not infinite, as Andrew is reminding us, in terms of wastes, of all kinds of types of wastes. But we can still move forward quite a lot on those feedstocks. What we would want to avoid is going into crop-based fuels. It's probably not a good idea when you set off in a sector that is already heavily contested in terms of its environmental footprint to also get involved with contested biofuels. So we should stay clear of that, but there is enough feedstock available. And we do need to start that e-fuel industry, which, but we have to be careful because it doesn't exist today on any industrial scale. We know it can be done, but it doesn't exist. And it's still probably twice as costly as even the more advanced biofuels to produce. Hopefully that cost will come down with scale. But we do need there a very particular feedstock, which is also not abundantly available, and that's green hydrogen. And behind the green hydrogen, you need a very large amount of renewable electricity. And that's really beyond the control of our sector, beyond the control or the reach of our SAF regulation, and more a general issue of our energy transformation in our societies, because everybody will be chasing the same renewable electricity. So we need to move forward on e-fuels, but we have to go step by step. Even though in the long run, it is definitely going to be the main fuel for aviation.
One really great question from Christopher Sergeant. Some EU countries have already brought in or intending to bring in different SAF blending mandates. Sorry, Philippe, this is for you. Can the Commission ensure the new regulation is applied equally across all EU countries? Otherwise, there is a problem with the level playing field and tankering.
Yes, so really that's our objective. And we do have several member states, 6 or 7, who have more or less binding mandates in place or about to be put in place. Very similar in design as what we have in mind. So, and also most, if not all of those member states would be happy to replace it with a joint European mandate for the reason that was mentioned in the question, namely level playing field. And I would add to that, not only level playing fields, but also a scale, because we will only achieve a large impact from this if we do it at a continental scale. And not just local scale. So that's really what we have in mind. And level playing field is key because, as I said before, there is going to be a cost element to this, not very large in the first 10 or 20 years, but there will be one. And rightly, operators are very sensitive to that, and so are we. So we have to take this into account and get as much as possible everybody on the same rules and on the same conditions.
Brilliant. And actually, going back to the point we had earlier, it's worth noting that all of the available sustainable aviation fuel at the moment is not from land grown. So at the moment, if you're buying SAF, you don't need to worry. I think that's a point to put in. We've got another great question from Kristen Sergeant. This is Philippe, this is for you. You touched on this, and I know this is something Andrew feels strongly about. Would the mandate also fall on foreign aircraft operators and airlines flying out of the EU? And are there political implications for this?
Well, the idea that we have in terms of the concept is that we should go to a point where the blend is the only fuel that you can uplift in Europe. And in that sense, everybody who comes over here and departs from a European airport will take up that fuel. So I think that's a kind of design where we are quite safe in terms of our jurisdiction, and will ensure at the same time a level playing field for those who are flying out of Europe.
Okay, we've got 3 minutes left. Nicholas, at the start of this, Andrew said that it was a shame to see business aviation being behind the airlines. I thought that was an arguable area. Would you like to argue that with Andrew?
Yes, of course. I think the demand is there. Honestly, we are being driven by our customers, by public perception on our industry. I think everyone within our industry has been fighting hard to be innovative and to reduce our impact and work in a more sustainable way. And our employees and customers have definitely expressed their will to use SAF or to find ways to decrease their footprint. But the problem is that at the moment, as an operator, we cannot influence the infrastructure, and the infrastructure is simply not there at the moment. We would love to uplift in Brussels, for example, where I'm based, tomorrow SAF, but it's very tricky to get it. So we are really waiting for either a mandate indeed, or availability, or a book and claim system to be developed, so we can start communicating that to our clients and get to work as soon as possible.
Okay, Andrew.
Alyssa, just can I say a few words to this question as well, because I think this is maybe a European issue, because when I look at our operators in the US, there's much more SAF and SAF blends around there, and this is much more prominent over there. And I know that our OE customers, they are pushing quite hard to fly with certain blends and SAF in their products. So I guess it's really we need to look to Europe in order to up the priority on SAF and SAF being used, and I guess the refuel initiative is the right thing to do.
Brilliant. We've got 1 minute left. Really fast, quick question. Just one answer. When will we see 50% SAF in aircraft tanks flying out of the EU or flying in the EU? Philippe.
Well,
just the year's fine.
Yeah, we will just fix a minimum. You know, you can go beyond as a business aviation community, and I just want to use, because I'm not going to announce percentages here today. It's going to come. But I just want to use the opportunity to commend the business aviation community and EBAA for consistently supporting this policy development, and I hope that we can continue to work with you on that also after the proposal is tabled and in the implementation in the coming years.
Anyone else want to shout out a year? Andrew?
I won't shout out a year, but I will shout out a question. Will it be the UK or will it be the EU which gets to that objective first? And I think with the UK, including aviation in its climate target today, it's taken the lead a little bit in ambition. So we might see a little competition between those two actors as to which one gets that 50% first.
I think we've had enough competition between those actors. Anyone else want to throw out a year? If not,
we are ready. We are ready. So whatever.
Whenever. Nicholas?
I'd say the same. We are ready, and we look forward to push it through to our clients and work together with the industry.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much to a fantastic panel. And let's have 2 seconds later. Attar, are you ready to take over?
Yes, thanks very much, Alistair, and thanks very much again for running that panel in your usual very enthusiastic and engaging way and manner. So thanks very much for that, and certainly very, very helpful to get all these various insights and a bit of challenges as well posed by Andrew and the regulators as well onto the industry. I think that serves everyone really well. So looking forward to pushing that further forward. We'd like to inform the audience that again, we'll be taking a short break, 5 minutes intermission. And again, you can be enjoying some footage and video content. And then happy to see you back in 5 minutes for the last panel, the last session, and then followed straight away by the closing remarks and closing speeches. So see you all back in 5 minutes. Thanks.
Sustainability is a key element of Gulfstream's strategy.
The things that have made our airplanes more efficient each and every generation are the aerodynamic characteristics of the airplane and also the engine technology. So working with our engine partners, Rolls-Royce, Pratt & Whitney, we've developed some very efficient engines, and engines that have reduced emissions, reduced fuel consumption over 30% in the last generation.
Our aircraft are more fuel efficient because they fly higher, typically 45, 47, and are certified to 51,000 feet, where commercial aircraft are typically flying 34, 35, 36,000 feet.
Gulfstream uses a 30-70 blend. 30% of it comes from a renewable source. For every gallon of sustainable aviation fuel that you use, you get at least a 60% reduction in CO2.
74% of our carbon footprint is facilities. Since 2014, as an organization, we've cut our carbon footprint by 10%, whilst we've grown our square footage by 25%.
We now offer a carbon offset program, which customers can take advantage of, take the amount of carbon that they've consumed in flying their aircraft and return that through environmental investments.
And the goal is to develop a strategy to design, build, support, and operate the most sustainable aircraft in the world.
So good afternoon once again to the whole audience. Glad that you're still with us in this afternoon. We'll move straight to the third session and the third panel, and from then onwards straight into the closing session of today's summit. So I'd like to hand over to the moderator for this third session, which is my colleague Rafael Fabian. He's the Director of European Affairs at Gamma. Rafael, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Athar. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So we've looked at how committed business aviation is to reducing its impact on climate change, and we've highlighted the importance of SAF to achieve its climate targets. We also focus on an essential policy tool to increase the uptake of SAF, the Refuel EU Aviation Initiative. Now, let's discuss the next steps to increase the uptake of SAF in Europe and to gain industry insights on what it will take to get the job done and make SAF widely available. It is my pleasure to introduce to you our expert panel. We're happy to welcome John Angus Smith, who is joining us from Luton in the UK. John Angus is Managing Director for the Europe, Middle East and Africa region at Signature Flight Support. He joined Signature Aviation PLC in 2015 as their Chief Risk Officer and was appointed to his current position in June 2019. He has a multi-industry, multidisciplinary background and experience. John Angus, please, would you give us your 60-second elevator pitch on what is Signature Flight Support doing on SAF? We'll get back to John in a second. He's been struggling, unfortunately, with connection issues. Well, let's move on straight away to Jonathan Wood, who joins us from Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And Jonathan is Vice President of Renewable Aviation for the Europe, Russia, Middle East, Africa, and ASPEC regions at Neste. He is responsible for all activities relating to the supply and sale of SAF and related services, including investments, business development, government relations, and regulatory issues. So here we go, 60 seconds to tell us what is Neste doing on SAF. Jonathan. Just need to unmute yourself, please.
Thank you, Rafael. Glad to be here and to talk about how Neste can contribute to the industry challenges that we've been talking about the last couple of hours. I think to start with, I think the case of change and the imperative for action is clear. We have a limited carbon budget. We have the targets both from the Paris Climate Change Conference and then subsequently at a national and EU level that we need to now step up to the plate on, and the longer we leave it to take action, the bigger the challenge will become. So, as has been mentioned already, we do have sustainable aviation fuel that can deliver roughly 80% reduction in carbon emissions versus the fossil jet fuel equivalent. It is available, the shop is open. So the challenge now is how do we scale up? And scaling up means demand. And demand, obviously, is taking into account, as we've heard in the earlier panels, the cost. This will and does cost more than fossil jet fuel to bring to market, and probably will continue to do so. But obviously, the sooner we scale up, the sooner we bring new technologies on board, as has been discussed in earlier panels, the sooner we can bring the cost down. So this is where I think policy can be an immense help in terms of incentives and mandates to move us forward. But Neste is already taking action to try and solve this chicken and egg problem. We are already investing $1.5 billion as we speak in bringing 1 million tons worth of SAF capacity on stream. And we have decisions pending around a further couple of investments, which are double that. So if we think about the overall level of demand that business aviation could have globally, I think that would go a very, very long way to meeting the ambitions to truly bring sustainable aviation fuel from being 1-2% up to 10, 15, 20 and beyond percent. So in short, we need to work together. I think all players here, we welcome other players bringing capacity on stream. We need to work at both the currently available technologies and the new technologies that are under development. And we need to move now. Let's start. We're on the runway. Let's get moving. So that's what I would like to say as an opening remarks from a Neste point of view.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Next on our panel, we have John Cooper, whose work base is my home city of Brussels, Belgium. John joined Fuels Europe and Konkawi in 2015 as Director General. He has 27 years of experience at BP and was previously Director Renewable Strategy Downstream, leading BP's commercial compliance strategy for renewables regulation. Here we go for your 60-second elevator pitch about your trade association. What is Fuels Europe doing on SAF? John.
Yeah, thank you, Rafael, and also thanks to the European Business Aviation Association for inviting me to contribute. Great conference today. So I speak for the European fuels industry. That's 40 companies operating refineries in Europe. And today we supply almost all of the liquid fuels for most of transport. And that includes most of the biofuels as well. I'm sure it's already been discussed. There's a small but growing usage of sustainable aviation fuel in Europe. And again, that's mostly produced and supplied by our members, including, of course, Neste, represented by Jonathan here. As an industry, we fully support Europe's objective for climate neutrality by 2050. And we know that this means a dramatic reduction in petroleum use, starting soon and approaching zero usage by mid-century. Many of our members are heavy investors in all types of renewables for electrification, gases and liquids. And we know that electrification and hydrogen will replace liquid petroleum fuels in much of European transport. But it still remains the case that renewable liquid fuels, hydrocarbon liquid fuel chemistry, is simply the best for hard to abate sectors, in particular aviation and maritime. So we've applied ourselves heavily to work out what we can do with liquid fuels. And Fuels Europe, and together with our science organization Konkawi, we've put together an integrated strategy to dramatically scale up the production of low carbon liquid fuels with a target of 150 million tons by 2050. And that's enough to supply all remaining liquid fuels needs across all sectors where it's still needed. And it's all set out on our website. And from our studies and the studies of others as well, there's enough sustainable feedstock, and this target of 150 million tons is within reach, technically, economically, and politically, and with some important social benefits as well from adopting this strategy. Happy to talk more. Thanks.
Thank you very much, John, and pleased that John Angus was able to reconnect. So John Angus, we wanted to hear your 60-second elevator pitch. What is Signature Flight Support doing on SAF?
Rafael, thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here today. Well, Signature is dedicated to getting as much SAF into the marketplace as possible to help our customers meet their sustainability goals. We've committed to permanent supply. Our network has pumped over 1 million gallons of SAF since Q4 2020. Most of that, in fact, virtually all of that in the US. Our sister company, Epic, was one of the first to supply wholesale companies back in 2012. In addition, we're making book and claim gallons available across the network in the next few months to fill the gap between physical supply and demand. So I think, Rafael, we're doing a lot. We want to be in the vanguard. We want to be up front. We want to be one of the leaders in the community that's pushing SAF. And through our global network of over 200 FBOs, we want to facilitate the supply as cost effectively as possible to our global customer network.
Thank you very much, John Angus. I'm very appreciative of that. And last but not least, we have also the pleasure of having with us Arvid Løkken, who is joining us from Oslo, Norway. Arvid works as Senior Advisor in Avinor's Carbon Reduction Program. His main responsibilities are jet biofuel and research and development projects. He has a background from innovation funding and innovation projects in organizations like Nordic Innovation, the Norwegian Ministry of Trade, Industry and Fisheries, and Sweco. So here we go, Arvid. What is your 60-second elevator pitch on what is Avinor doing on SAF?
Thank you, Rafael, and thank you for the invitation to participate in this panel. Avinor is Norway's state-owned airport operator and also national ANSP, responsible for 44 airports in Norway. In Avinor, we realized long ago we're all in the same boat or on the same flight. It's not enough for us to reduce our own emissions. The big emissions come from aviation, not airport operations. We started working with SAF in 2007. Already then, climate risk was defined as an important risk for our organization, the transitional risk for our business and sector. Back then, SAF was the only viable solution. Electrification and hydrogen were not considered real options at that time. In 2016, Avinor Oslo Airport was the first hub in the world to blend SAF into the fuel system. That was an important milestone for us. And we're now, together with the industry, in the process of finding out how to scale local SAF uptake and production in Norway. So I guess I'll leave it with that for the introduction.
Thank you very much, Arvid. Thank you, gentlemen. Impressive credentials. Now, looking at what we need to get the job done, you've provided an introduction as to where your companies and organizations are at right now. Let's look at the impressive industry ecosystems we have represented here and ask you about how do you see your role in increasing the uptake of SAF? Because it's great where we're got, we have a lot of work to do. So John Angus, how does Signature Flight Support as a fixed base operator see its role in increasing the uptake of SAF? John, please.
Thank you. Raphael, in summary, I think I'd summarize our role as being a critical facilitator. We've got a huge network of over 200 locations globally. So we've got a unique opportunity to make SAF physically available to customers in more locations. However, clearly production limitation is an issue. So as production increases, the easier and more affordable we'll be able to make it for operators, the easier it will be for them to adopt the use of it as a critical means to reduce their footprint. And for us, there are two critical channels. First will be the physical supply of SAF, and then the indirect supply through the purchase of virtual gallons through the book and claim process, which we'll come on to later. So that's how I'd summarize our role, Raphael.
Well, thank you so much. Let's start to Jonathan at Neste. And how do you see your role in increasing uptake of SAF?
Well, first and foremost, as a supplier, as a producer, to make it available to indeed customers such as John over there, representing Signature, to bring it to as many locations as quickly as possible in as cost-efficient a manner as possible. But if I step back a little bit from that immediate response, I mean, to start with, our whole philosophy at Neste is underpinned by our determination to reduce emissions, to develop circular technologies that remove or reuse carbon that's already in our ecosystem. So we have developed production technology, which we're now deploying and scaling up, as I mentioned in my opening remarks. From 100,000 tons to 1 million tons and beyond of production in the next couple of years. But we also see our role as developing the future technologies. We've heard in previous panels about the use of other feedstocks, municipal solid waste and other wastes and residues, but also indeed the use of renewable energy to develop eSAF. So we see our role very much there also about developing the technologies and the building blocks for the future so the industry can indeed scale up. And also, I would say it's about educating and informing and making transparent. So we heard comments earlier about feedstocks. So just to be clear, no crop-based feedstocks are used, to my knowledge, by any of the producers currently. And I know that both Neste and other projects that are being developed are all in the space of using feedstocks that do not create this food for fuel kind of debate. Quite the opposite. So it's about educating, it's about informing also the policymakers. We've heard from Philip and the EU representatives earlier about the plans. So we see our role also here about helping inform key stakeholders, not just customers, but also key stakeholders and policymakers about what is possible, because we've heard the conversation also about we want as an industry and we need as an industry to set ambitious targets, but we also need to be realistic. So trying to inform as well as possible that those deliberations so that we do indeed help move the industry forward in as ambitious a way as possible. So yes, on the one hand, it's about making the product available and developing the developing the production technologies and scaling up, but it's also about informing the whole industry, customers and policymakers about how we can move this industry forward and how quickly we can move it forward.
Excellent. Thank you for giving us that perspective. And as we move over to John, we'd like to find out from a trade association representing refiners in Europe, how does Fuels Europe see its role in increasing the uptake of SAF?
Yeah, thanks, Rafael. Really, there are multiple parts to this. The first part is, we are primarily interested in investing to produce and supply this sustainable aviation fuel. And we do have to be honest with everybody that producing fuel this way costs more. As Jonathan said earlier, it costs more than making petroleum. It's typically capital intensive, and that means investing for the long term, where you need a stability in the market for sustainable aviation fuels. It needs to be consistent in demand, and also the ability to cover the full costs. And so we need to find ways to make the investors interested in investing more in this production. And the other part of this, of course, is making the facility in the market for the airlines and aviation operators to find this fuel affordable in the overall scheme of their business as well. So while we see a key role in scaling up investments, we also see a key role in being part of the conversation around the policy framework. And the policy framework, in our view, needs to be integrated across not only aviation and maritime, but also the role, potentially a transitional role for road transport to support the scale up of this set of technologies. Because the good thing about liquid fuels is that the production of low carbon liquid fuels is quite similar, whether you're talking about a need for road transport or aviation or maritime, which means it's kind of a no regret set of technologies. If we have some of this production going into road transport for some years, but then road transport eventually fully electrifies, that volume is then available for maritime and aviation as well. So we call it, there's an integrated strategy, but it's also a no regret strategy. The integrated policy framework is really important for us to work on, and we see a key role for ourselves helping to facilitate that conversation.
Thank you very much, John. And now over to Arvid, please, with the same question. How does Avinor see itself as an enabler to increase the uptake of SAF?
I guess for us, it starts with the core task of making the infrastructure available and ready, make sure there are no problems in phasing in. And for us, it started there in showing it's possible and blending SAF into Oslo, Avinor Oslo Airport. But taking it further, we work as a catalyst with the aviation industry in Norway, together with the Alliance, together with the Association of Industries and trade organizations. It started with fact finding and getting a common fact base up for showing how we could produce SAF sustainably in Norway, pointing to forest residues as an important resource. So we engaged in research on that topic, and also algae in the longer term. And we have been through a process together with these partners in the industry also in creating a roadmap for Norwegian aviation, pointing towards fossil-free aviation in 2050. And also I'd like to add that sustainability is something that we spent quite a bit of time working on, making sure that is not jeopardized, and looking at how we can increase and improve sustainability in sustainable aviation fuels today, and also looking into the future.
Thank you very much, Arvid. Now, obviously, there's a lot of work, and it's great we have this ecosystem represented here to get this work done. But if we talk about next steps, we're talking about immediate priorities. Jonathan, maybe from a Neste perspective, what is the immediate next action that you're going to take to make sure that we can progress the production and delivery of SAF?
Okay, so in terms of production, we have, as I mentioned, about 100,000 tons worth of capacity currently available, and product being distributed across Europe, North America, and indeed even into Asia. In parallel, we're investing as we speak in additional capacity to enable an additional 1 million tons worth of SAF to be available from the beginning of 2023. And we have a decision that's literally going to be made in the coming weeks around a further investment, hopefully in Europe. Hopefully the regulatory and policy landscape helps support this investment. And we have also announced an additional intention to look at an additional plant in the Rotterdam region. So we've got 3 projects there, which in total will hopefully bring on about 2 million tons worth of additional SAF capacity, which as I mentioned earlier, would be pretty close to 50% of all business aviation fuel demand globally on its own. So in summary, we're trying to break this conundrum of the chicken and the egg. We're laying the egg right now. But we do need policy support, be it in terms of incentives and I'm sure, as Philip has mentioned earlier, the mandate support to help promote and the usage of SAF, because as has been indicated, funding these investments, it's all very well and good that Neste is investing, but others need to invest as well. And the funding of these investments and the financing is a challenge, remains a challenge. So that's in respect of production today, but there are 2 other phases that we see coming down the track. But the investment that I referred to is in terms of the known technology around HEFA or hydrotreated esters and fatty acids. But we do see a future for other technologies such as the use of municipal waste and other feedstocks in using Fischer-Tropsch technology and in alcohol to jet. As a second phase, there are some projects that are on the drawing board as we speak or are beginning to be built. And indeed a third phase, which was mentioned earlier, which is the eSAF or e-fuels, where renewable power is used to convert hydrogen and carbon captured from the air or other emissions into liquid fuels. So we see 3 phases, and we as Neste are indeed actively looking at the second and third phases. So we're not purely working on the first phase. We're into the implementation of the first phase, but are looking at developing projects in the second and third phases as well. That's on the production side. And on the delivery side, well, first one needs to blend it, as we've heard earlier. The approvals are up to a 50% blend with fossil jet fuel. We are working with Airbus and Rolls-Royce to see if indeed 100% SAF can be deployed. There will need to be an extensive certification process around that, but we're very hopeful that will lead to the use of 100% SAF and avoid the need for blending over the long term. But also about delivering it to the location. So John Angus referred to earlier how Signature are looking to make this available, and we look forward to supplying John and his team at Signature, not only in the US and UK, but also elsewhere, and indeed other FBOs in order to make this available as quickly as possible to operators who are interested in taking SAF on board. And we need to make it as easy as possible. So whatever systems and mechanisms are developed, we need to make it easy for the users to select a low carbon option, whether it's selling carbon reduction separately from the physical supply of the fuel to the operator or whatever. But we're certainly working as Neste, and I know others in the industry are working on this as well.
That's a very good point you mentioned about the nature of the business requiring such investments. And I'd like to maybe throw this question to John about the necessity for working with the EU as an industry. How can the EU and the industry work together in increasing the uptake of SAF?
Well, Rafael, that's a good question, and I mean, thankfully, there's a lot going on already. We really welcome the announcement of the Refuel EU Aviation initiative from Commissioner Vălean, and we're planning to contribute as strongly as we possibly can there. And also the announcement of an alliance for renewable and low carbon liquid fuels. Again, we think that helps create a framework to accelerate things. There's also good news in that our members across the whole industry have already announced around 30 projects for the production of low carbon and renewable liquid fuels across Europe, and some of those have already broken ground. But for sure, we need many more. And in fact, to reach goals that we've talked about, we'll need hundreds of production plants. Relative to a typical traditional refinery, these plants are smaller volume, designed to cover a diverse range of technologies. The critical thing really is to get this stability of policy to make it attractive for people to make investment commitments. And that means also, I mean, Jonathan's just talked around innovation in the technologies around feedstocks and production. We also do need some innovation in the policy itself. What's done in Europe today is very much dependent on this book and claim system. The book and claim system is essentially piggybacking on the Renewable Energy Directive for road transport, and the certificates for biojet are purchased by the road transport sector. So there's an element of cross subsidy there. It works well, but it's limited, and we need more than that to go further forward. And so we need to work with policymakers and all of the stakeholders to find the right set of policies that make it attractive for the investor. And again, at the end of the whole chain, the customer. And we could think of the customer as the airline or aviation operator. And we could possibly think of the customer as the passenger as well, or cargo customer as well. So there's a number of ways that this can be thought of. We for sure need to make it attractive for everyone in the chain to step up and do more. And that's certainly what we're committed to do.
Thank you very much for those thoughts. Now, you did mention book and claim as an absolutely necessary starting point to trigger this process. And for that, I'd like to turn to John Angus at Signature and ask you, how would you be so kind as to explain for our audience what is the book and claim system for SAF, and how will it help increase the uptake of SAF in Europe?
Thank you, Raphael. Well, certainly book and claim is being talked about a lot at the moment. I mean, it's enabled by the substitutability of SAF with Jet A, and is in our view key to accelerate the adoption of SAF by our industry, as the physical production infrastructure and supply chain is still at an early stage. Essentially, book and claim enables an operator to purchase SAF in an area where it's not yet available, but still receive environmental benefits while the fuel is dispensed elsewhere. So I'll try and make that simple in concept as I go through this. So when SAF is manufactured and passed to SAF, the sustainability attributes are documented and credits created. The SAF is then inserted locally into the fuel supply chain. And that point about local supply is really important because it reduces the logistics costs and clearly it also reduces the impact on the environment. Distant entities can then participate in the sustainable fuels market by purchasing SAF, or in reality, virtual SAF. And the sustainability credits are then transferred to the buyer. So buyers of SAF can claim renewable fuel credits under schemes such as the EU Emissions Trading Scheme. So the best analogy I can give you in a real practical sense is depositing money for a family member at a local bank, say in London. And the credit is then transferred to that family member's account in a different country. And this is withdrawn in, say, Paris. So the fuel's being deposited locally, but the credit's been taken in a different location. So book and claim fills the local availability gap and will enable, in our view, the expansion of the market. It's effectively virtual SAF for now, and while offsets may be necessary now to deliver that expansion in demand, book and claim is actually a double win because it helps an operator lower their carbon footprint, and it also helps the aviation industry move towards the goal of carbon neutrality. And in the context of what was announced by Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, last night, where he's now set a 2035 deadline for a 78% emissions cut, and aviation is included in that target, that's very, very relevant now. And so the final point I'd like to make is that the physical impact on CO2, the reduction, it can happen from one aircraft at one airport, or from 10 aircraft across the whole EU airport system. And despite the virtual nature of the book and claim process, it's still a physical reduction of CO2 that happened because someone purchased the book and claim. And that's why it's such an important tool for us as an industry going forward. So I hope that explains it in a real practical way, Raphael.
Thank you very much, John Angus. Indeed, it does, and it shows that a robust and accessible book and claim system will indeed help SAF progressively make its way into fuel tanks all over Europe. Now, I'd like to go back to Norway and seek some inspiration from Arvid and Avinor. Arvid, wanted to ask you, what is Norway's mandate on SAF, and what has been Avinor's experience with it? We're eager to hear, since we're talking about the possibility of a mandate in the EU.
Thank you, Rafael. Norwegian authorities were first in the world to implement.
Sorry, Arvid, can I just ask you to just come a little closer to your microphone so that we can hear you well?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Thank you very much.
Hear me better now?
Yes, we do.
Great. Norwegian authorities were first in the world to implement the SAF mandate, operational from January last year. The mandate is on 0.5% of all jet fuel uplifted in Norway, domestic and internationally. The requirement is for advanced bio, and it's been important for Norwegian aviation that palm oil and palm oil products are not accepted, and with advanced being required, only waste and residues are allowed, so we avoid land use issues. The mandate is imposed on the fuel suppliers and is intentionally quite flexible. The fuel can be sourced in at any location and any time of the year, and also allows for cooperation between fuel suppliers. So in practice, one fuel supplier can provide the whole volume at one airport, for example, during December, at least for low percentages. And 2020 was, of course, a special year for aviation, but signals have been that the mandate has been followed and that 0.5% was blended into the system last year. So the intention with the mandate is contributing to a first early market to get production up. And I guess it's fair to say that the airlines have been a bit skeptical to the mandate. Of course, it represents extra costs in addition to other national aviation taxes in a situation, of course, with tough international competition and small margins. And 0.5% is maybe manageable, but 10, 20, 30% would be different and would be very hard for the airlines to handle unless the government offered some kind of funding. And of course, an important aspect of it is what mandates do other countries have, and refuel EU aviation and what comes there. Level playing field is important. So together with the industry, we're looking into what is needed to scale uptake and investments.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Arvid. Let's stay with you for the last round of questions that we have. We've got 4 minutes to go, so let's give it 1 minute to each one of you. What challenges and opportunities did Avinor identify in adopting SAF?
Well, as I mentioned briefly in my introduction, Avinor Oslo Airport became the first international airport in the world to blend SAF into the fuel infrastructure at an airport in January 2016. So this was a cooperation project with AirBP as project managers, Lufthansa Group, KLM, SAS, Neste, and Sky Energy. The fuel was mixed into the dispenser and hydrant system at the airport and offered to all airlines refueling there. So fully integrated in the conventional fuel infrastructure. And we did it for the first time for SAF according to the mass balance principle. All airlines got the same mix of fossil and SAF, but only airlines paying the extra cost could claim usage in their accounting and communication. So we encountered no problems with the infrastructure or technology and no worries among passengers. But it was a bit of work to get the fuel produced, transported, and supplied, getting time to produce the batch and so on, and importing some of the fuel from overseas. But a lot of learning for it.
Thank you very much. Very briefly, John, for Fuels Europe, would you like to tell us what are your challenges and opportunities in increasing the uptake of SAF in the immediate term?
Challenges are getting the policy framework right, as I talked about before. Opportunities, well, it's clear that there's a great appetite for sustainable aviation fuel across Europe. And actually, it's really great to see the business aviation community stepping forward here, because I think they realize, and we can see as well, or certainly our members can see, their commercial model is a little different and not quite so, maybe not quite so cost sensitive on fuel as civil aviation. And so I think European business aviation can certainly play a role in helping to accelerate this progress. I think there's great opportunity here for a number of different players to offer low carbon solutions to all of their customers, whether they're individuals or companies with significant air travel needs. And there's a great opportunity to increase the size of this business and offer more solutions. So we're excited about that. It's complex, many moving parts. But yeah, it's very exciting to be part of this space today.
Fantastic, thank you. And the 2 last minutes of our summit, shared equally by Jonathan at Neste. What are your challenges and opportunities in the immediate term?
I would say, firstly, about demonstrating the sustainability, using feedstocks that clearly give a clear carbon reduction, and then making that evident and transparent to the customers with the documentation that was referred to in a prior panel. Making it easy for our customers, finding the mechanisms and the tools, and that means making it available at the key locations, but also making it easy for customers to actually order a lower, when booking a flight, to make it a lower carbon flight, maybe even moving to an opt-out approach rather than an opt-in approach. I would say we've got a huge challenge ahead of us in terms of building the production supply capability with existing and new technologies. And that's where we need to recognize the higher cost, and that's where I think the policy frameworks, mandates and incentives, and a combination hopefully of both, can really help accelerate the uptake. And I really think that business aviation can take a lead here, especially in Europe.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, much appreciated. And then the closing thoughts from John Angus, from your perspective, your challenges and opportunities. Please unmute if you'd like. Thank you very much.
So on challenges, I certainly agree with the points made by everyone, I think, on the policy framework. The 2 I'd like to add from a B&GA perspective are the acceptability of the book and claim concept. And then finally, the creation of more chemical pathways so that we can, to the production of SAF, so that we can improve the cost effectiveness of the production model, and that will make it more attractive to our customers. Just on the opportunity side, just selling SAF within our B&GA story. You see, the thing about our customer base is that whilst we contribute to a small percentage of the emissions impact, our customers tend to make decisions for companies. They're generally CEOs or senior managers that make decisions in companies that have a huge impact on the emissions, on carbon emissions. So the fact that we can sell our story effectively within the B&GA community will have a disproportionate impact, the benefit that will have on the emissions reduction. So that's our big opportunity, and that's why it's so important to us at Signature.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you all. It's been evident from our discussion that cross-industry partnerships are key in delivering EU-wide availability of SAF and driving down sectoral emissions at pace. We thank you for your participation and best wishes of success in tackling this humongous task that's just ahead of us, and it has started off so well. And we wish you the best in your various roles as key stakeholders of the SAF industry ecosystem, of which we're proud to be part. Back over to you, Athar.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rafael, for leading that very, very insightful, interesting, but also very stimulating panel on the uptake, availability, geographical spread of SAF. So, ladies and gentlemen, I suggest that we move straight through to the closing session of today's summit. And I'm honored and privileged to introduce to you Mr. Jan-Christophe Oetjen, Member of the European Parliament and Vice Chair of the Committee on Transport and Tourism, to share with us his closing keynote address. Mr. Oetjen, please welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, dear Athar, and thanks to the European Business Aviation Association, and congratulations to this very timely and high-level summit on SAF. I participated in to this summit since 2 o'clock this afternoon, and honestly, I was not annoyed 1 minute. It was very, very interesting to hear those discussions. So congratulations from my side. SAF is the key for decarbonizing the aviation industry. There's a wide range of kerosene alternatives produced from chemical reactions from various feedstocks that are both biological and synthetic. And next to electrical and hydrogen propulsion, SAFs are one of the 3 technological solutions that have the potential to be true net zero carbon solutions. And the major advantage of SAFs is that they can already be used today as drop-in fuels and should not require substantial reworking on current aircraft or engine designs. We heard from Thierry Lamont earlier today that 100% SAF will be possible in the short future. This is really, I really appreciate such remarks and the efforts that are done by the industry. There's an additional benefit. SAFs significantly reduce the non-CO2 climate effects, as these are likely to be twice as high as the CO2 effects. There has been a report by EASA, and this is a very important argument here in the European Parliament. You know that we are discussing a lot with in the TRAN committee and with the ENVI committee, and a lot of members of Parliament are not very let's say, positive towards aviation, and this is still the case. So this is a very important additional benefit that we should highlight. As part of the Green Deal, the decarbonization of the aviation sector is an important step. In 2019, global emissions of civil aviation accounted for around 3% of global CO2 emissions, with a rising trend due to rising numbers of passengers. And if global aviation were a country, it would rank among the top 10 emitters. And there's a fact. This is that better efficiency in terms of jet engine and technological process, the amount of fuel burn per passengers dropped already by 24% between 2005 and 2016, and the industry has already introduced ambitious long-term targets. This clear commitment that we heard today by the business aviation industry, and that we hear regularly by the sector as a whole, is very important. To achieve these ambitious goals on CO2 emission reduction, propulsion will still be key, and SAF are the most promising technology alongside with hydrogen and electric propulsion, but those will not become technically and commercially available before 2030 and 2040. So we have to rely on SAFs, and those are vital to enable net zero long-haul aviation, and therefore to contribute to sustainable aviation for all large commercial aircrafts in the medium term. And in the short term, this is already possible for smaller aircrafts as those that you use in business aviation. In ICAO, therefore, SAFs are one element of the basket of measures to reduce aviation emissions, which also includes technology standards, operational improvements, and CORSIA. With the Green Deal, Europe is taking the lead on the decarbonization of the economy. And as we already heard, the Commission will soon present the Fit for 55 package. And in this package, we are discussing the way forward. And this is what the summit is all about. And I personally learned a lot today. And my view on this Fit for 55 package is that fuel suppliers and operators should have a clear signal that transport fuels must become carbon neutral, and that the sustainable, renewable and low carbon fuels must be deployed on a large scale without delay. There is a necessity of coherent recharging and refueling infrastructure to fully enable the widespread uptake of low and zero emission fuels. We have to promote this market uptake of the industry with providing investment certainty to increase production volumes. We heard that, for example, by Neste. So a stable policy framework over sufficient time horizon, combined with an ambitious blending mandate, will enable investments into the production of sustainable aviation fuels. And on the other hand, we need to make sure that deployment will take place. I call for a more binding targets on rollout of infrastructure, and we will discuss this in the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Directive, and further measures to ensure the full interoperability of infrastructure and infrastructure use. On the other hand, in the Renewable Energy Directive, we have to make sure that all sustainable waste and residue feedstocks fall under its scope, so that we have enough feedstock in order to produce those SAFs. And combined, we have more availability on the one hand of feedstock, and on the other hand, the blending mandates and the long-term vision. We think that the production of SAF will become on a cost question more available and more accessible for the industry. But I will be frank, there's a danger that in all those discussions in the European Parliament and in the Commission, as we have on the one hand the Transport Committee and on the other hand the Environmental Committee, and that we have in the Commission on the one hand DG Move and the other hand DG Climate, there's a danger that we will have provisions that do not fit well together. So we have to make sure that all those different legislative files will be brought together in a coherent policy framework. For me, as a member of parliament and a liberal, traveling means freedom. And despite the severe situation of international aviation, the EU has now the opportunity to build a better, greener and cleaner aviation business model. SAFs are already available, and they are one of the most promising technologies to reach climate objectives. And this is shared by all political groups in the European Parliament. Sufficient investment is now necessary into technologies and infrastructure, and this has to start now. Edina Valian said this as well. This has to start now, supported by public and private money, as well as SMEs, to increase the share of sustainable aviation fuels. From my point of view, there seems to be an overreaching commitment by all stakeholders in the sector to green the sector and to create a level playing field on SAF. And with a stable policy framework, we can provide certainty for companies to invest and to help to boost the uptake of sustainable fuels. And with an ambitious blending mandate, we can enable that the refuel aviation will be what Alistair called earlier today an energy drink for SAFs. And I will try to help and do all my best to bring the aviation industry into a better, greener future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ötchin, for those very welcome remarks, but also for the support that we've enjoyed from you and a number of your colleagues in the Parliament. And certainly on behalf of the Coalition, I can say that we look very much forward to working with you and your colleagues in the TRAN, but also in the ENVI Committee on the Refuel Initiative and other legislative and regulatory proposals as well. So thank you very much once again for joining us here today. Really appreciate your commitment and your time. Having said that, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor for me to introduce to you a personal friend, Mr. Kurt Edwards. Kurt is the Director General of the International Business Aviation Council, working very closely with the EBA and GAMA on sustainable aviation fuels worldwide. And great, Kurt, that you're with us today, joining us from the other side of the Atlantic. So please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Atar, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak here on behalf of the International Business Aviation Council. This has been an amazing event, and congratulations on it. These types of events are so necessary and so helpful in informing the business aviation community, but also in building a community of operators, manufacturers, fuel suppliers, fuel producers, and government officials all around the shared interest of SAF. So congratulations on such a great first summit today, and I hope we will see more as we go. IBAC is pleased to be a part of the Business Aviation Sustainable Aviation Fuel Coalition, and we see things from a global perspective, given our work at the International Civil Aviation Organization and our work with our partners like EBAA, NBAA, and other member associations around the world. You heard a little bit at the beginning today. The first panel provided a great overview of really what is the foundation of this conversation that we're having, and that is the Business Aviation Commitment on Climate Change. IBAC joined with GAMA back in 2009 to develop it, working with the industry across operators and manufacturers. And the three goals that were laid out then were ambitious then, and they remain ambitious now. And the most recent ones being the medium-term goal, carbon neutral growth from 2020, and the long-term goal, having our emissions by 2050 relative to 2005 levels. Both of those will need, well, all the levers or all the pillars of the plan will be necessary to contribute to meeting those goals, but SAF is going to be the most critical to getting us there. And any analysis that looks at long-term goals, whether it's 2050, 2035, 2060, they all take into account the need for sufficient quantities and use of SAF. Today's event, for me, I think laid out a very clear plan by the business aviation community in Europe for SAF. What I heard overall is that industry is taking action, and governments have a very important role to play in this world too. And the discussion, I think, underscored for me a few points, and I took some notes here. If I could just kind of share with you what I really heard throughout today. The first is that it is really important to incentivize the entire SAF value chain so we can grow the production and grow the supply and grow the demand for this. I think one of your panelists talked about creating a market for SAF and putting in place policies to do that. And you had the EU institutions talking about it as well. Second, it's going to be important to prioritize SAF and to allocate capacity for producing it to aviation. We've made a significant investment in the current fleet of aircraft and the near-term and medium-term fleet of aircraft to come. They are technologically advanced and increasingly efficient, but we're still going to need liquid fuel. And so while other sectors have alternatives for their power sources, we at this time don't. We still need liquid fuel to operate safely. And I was very interested in hearing the term of an integrated policy framework that looks at this issue of allocating capacity such that those of us that need the liquid fuel can have it. So I want to learn more about that. Third theme I heard today is the criticality of incentivizing more research and development for SAF, especially when it comes to types of feedstocks and methods of production. Very important. And then one last theme that I heard, which was very clear, especially in this third panel, is the importance of supporting systems that can provide accountability and transparency to encourage business aviation to operators and their clients to purchase SAF. And I'm speaking, it's like a generic way of discussing the book and claim system, but I think we're going to have not just an industry's desire for it and support for it, but really kind of government recognition of its accountability and transparency. So it's a system that the concept is already there. It's in use here and there, but I think we need to kind of build it out more. What I take from the event overall is that in the midst of this global pandemic, the interest in SAF is not waning, it's only growing, it's only rising. And the sector is taking this period to inform itself of the benefits of SAF and its contribution to the sustainability as our operations resume, which is critical and crucial to all of us. The event demonstrates that the business aviation sector's interest in preparing for a future in which SAF will play a huge role in our own sustainability and meeting those goals that we've set. And these goals happen to overlap with the goals the governments are setting as well. So ultimately, cooperation, whether it's cross-industry or industry government, those will be key. I think the prospects here are exciting, and I'm looking forward to building on the momentum displayed here at the event today. Attar, thank you, and thank you BAA for inviting me to join you, and congratulations on a dynamic and interesting summit.
Well, thanks very much, Kurt, for those very, very welcoming words, very pleasant words. I think we certainly at EBA and Gamma have always enjoyed working together with IBAC and look forward to continuing to do so. And I would like to thank you as well for leading IBAC, but also being very much part of this coalition and pushing the whole SAF file further forward. Ladies and gentlemen, now that we've come to the close of today's summit, I would like to personally thank all those involved for helping us organize this Business Aviation SAF Summit in Europe for the first time. Of course, our guests of honor, Mrs. Adina Valian and Mr. Jan-Christoph Oetjen, but also our expert moderators, panelists, and others without whom today would not have been possible. And once again, our sincere gratitude also goes to the main sponsors, Bombardier, Dassault Aviation, Embraer, Gulfstream, Lux Aviation, and our supporting sponsor, Sky Energy. And last but not least, on behalf of the entire Business Aviation Coalition on Sustainable Aviation Fuels, I would like to thank all of you, all delegates, for participating in today's summit. With more than 1,000 participants, we're humbled to see just how many interested parties are rallying behind the call for more SAF. And all those of you who participated today, I would like to thank you for your insights, for your great questions, and for your time. And we will get back to you in answering the questions that we didn't have time for during the panels. And to the participating EU institutions, we thank you for your presence and your open conversations and discussions with us. We're looking forward to the Refuel EU Aviation Initiative, and in the end, towards flying with much more SAF in our tanks. And finally, I would like to say that as key stakeholders within the SAF coalition, EBAA and Gamma are happy to deliver today a policy document called the European Business Aviation Vision for Sustainable Aviation Fuel. It outlines a strategic plan for advancing the production, availability, and use of sustainable aviation fuels in Europe, in line with today's summit. I invite you all to read it. It is made and will be made available through this platform and various other places online. Please also note that the recording of this event will be available within the next 24 hours on the platform itself, and the platform will be live for a duration of at least 1 month. Feel free to visit this page to review the event or download any documents you might find in the SAF Coalition tab. And with that, dear participants, I would like to wish you all a great evening, and I would like to thank you for being with us here today. We're looking forward to seeing you all in person at the next possible opportunity. Stay safe, stay healthy. I wish you all goodbye.